Futures trading involves a substantial risk of loss and may not be suitable for all investors. Therefore, carefully consider whether such trading is suitable for you in light of your financial condition.
Good morning. It's Tuesday, January 27th. I'm Phil Streible, Chief Market Strategist at Blue Line Futures. So looking at some overnight headlines, the impact on the markets, and a rundown on the precious metals. You do have precious metal futures snapping back here after yesterday's late day sell-off. We saw silver futures at one point jumping up to $117 an ounce on quite a bit of FOMO buying, reaching into our resistance point here on the chart back before pulling back down to $103 an ounce. Futures overnight rebounding on up to $112 an ounce, and as of the start of the recording, we were closer to $113, so the volatility is quite high. You look at February gold futures sitting at $50.80, down about $2.40 here, but is well off that low, holding back onto that $5,000 and just below the 5,100 level. Now, prices in China, they are trading at that premium to the comparable rates here in London and the US, but there are some signs of strains on some of the listed vehicles. China's only pure play silver fund had halted new subscriptions, so a bit of curbs coming into that market over there, and we're seeing a ripple effect on things like the copper market, which are down about 2.6%, sitting at $5.89. You look at gold futures, they are holding above that $5,000 an ounce for the second straight day, as a weak U.S. dollar is helping extend the rally, fueled by some geopolitical risks, some investor flight from some of the bonds and some of the currencies out there. Gold's 14-day average range sitting at $101 an ounce. The pivot point sitting at $49.33, and trend support is much lower at $46.07. You look at silver, you got that 14-day average range at $6.41, so quite a bit of volatility in that market here, and the pivots at about 95.68 as well as trend support. The precious metal ETF flows, we're continuing to see some buying in the gold market, platinum and palladium, and a lot of selling still taking place in the silver market. You look at the year-to-date total gold ETFs rising about 1.4%, and yesterday they added about 37,000 troy ounces of gold, the fourth straight day of growth here, and total gold held by those ETFs up 1.4%. Gold's up about 16-17% on the year. You go to the silver mart, those year-to-date ETFs, they've declined 2.4%. So you get that breakout that occurred right around November 10th at about $50, $51, and that push on up higher here with futures almost doubling. And the same thing with the ETFs, with the SLV. You're probably seeing a lot of that liquidation take place as traders are just saying it's run too far, too fast at the start of the year, and they really want to rotate and position into some other things. So you look at the ETFs, they cut about 1.77 million ounces of silver holdings in the previous trading session, and the third straight day of declines. Now the gold silver ratio does sit at an impressive 45-1. Looking at the broader macro markets here, the S&P 500 getting close to that record peak from 2 weeks ago, with futures indicating 5 straight days of gains. Last week's tariff turmoil is in the rearview mirror, and now the focus is on a big week for earnings. Boeing, General Motors, UPS all looking to report here this morning. So the S&P 500 up about 0.3%, the NASDAQ up about 0.7%. The Russell 2000 snapping back about 25 basis points. So looking at these markets here, you're gonna see the dollar index really play this role. You're going to see the earnings play the role. You're going to see the volatility in the metals. They are really going to impact some of these markets. Silver's already dropped $1 in about that 30 seconds that I've reported between that last update. So just quite a bit of volatility in that market. You look at natural gas futures, traders are taking profits after prices shot up nearly 30% on Monday amid those freezing temperatures. So in order for natural gas to have this sustainable rally, you'd have to have another weather system followed by another weather system come in to drain out some of those inventories, because of the fact if you look at the 5-year average on inventories versus the current, we're about 6% higher than where that average is. So the macro markets and the equities extending their gains overnight. You go to the earnings, 69 of the S&P 500 companies have reported earnings so far. 77% have beaten those analyst forecasts, 15% have missed. Again, you have American Airlines, Boeing, General Motors, and UPS all right out before the bell, and Texas Instruments, that's going to be after the bell. So we'll also get the consumer confidence data coming out, the Fed Richmond Index here. You'll have President Donald Trump speaking. You've got a 2-day Fed meeting going on right now. And if you look, the Fed's external communications, they're in a blackout period till Thursday. Markets are only looking at a 2.8% chance that the Fed will reduce rates here at tomorrow's meeting. And then March 18th, it's only about a 14%. So dollar index, 96.77. You got the euro currency pushing through that 119 mark. WTI crude oil futures sitting right at about 60.60, coincidentally at about the same price as yesterday at this time. Still above that $60 pivot, coming down to it and bouncing off it. 10-year yields 4.22%. New range is 4.29 down to 4.11. VIX futures at 18.09, still well below that 20 level. Bitcoin futures for February sitting at 88,000. It's on that edge of trend support here, kind of stuck more in a neutral type of trading range. The S&P 500 gamma exposure, that's also neutral. And then if you got to question the rally in the U.S. equity markets, what I always like to do is I'll look across the pond here. I'll look at Europe, I'll look at Asia, because those European stocks, as India and European Union reached a free trade agreement, and Asian equities extended their gains, lifted by a continued rally in tech stocks in Taiwan and South Korea, with the MSCI Asia Pacific Index gaining about 1.2%. So expect to see that volatility in the metals markets continue. Copper futures looking a bit interesting here. Platinum futures also down about $200. That looks interesting as well. So we want to keep an eye on some of these other outside markets here for any potential opportunities. So you guys got any questions? You want to open up a future trading account? Send an email to info@bluelinefutures.com. And remember, futures option trading does involve risk of loss. May not be suitable to all investors. Good luck. Good trading.
Futures trading involves a substantial risk of loss and may not be suitable for all investors. Therefore, carefully consider whether such trading is suitable for you in light of your financial condition.